Locked gate. Lock my access road. And Denise Hartley stood on the HOA sidewalk with her phone aimed at it. Air cool and a BBQ smell drifting past the metal bars. In a voice she said, the HOA had approved access, then threatened to cut the lock and called it common property, while my coffee steamed and the chain stayed still in the sun. On my kitchen table lay a printed notice of violation email with an official case number bold formatting and the word lien sitting there like a dare. Touch it and you're trespassing, finally, someone fought back. The system treats your gate and access road as private until a recorded easement says otherwise. An HOA claim doesn't override a county recorded deed. Denise Hartley stopped on the HOA sidewalk like she belonged there. Clipboard tucked under one arm, phone already up. The lens pointed straight at my gate lock, steady as a courthouse camera. She didn't call out like a neighbor. She called out like an order had already been approved. "Hi there," she said, bright and sharp. "I'm with the HOA. We need access. Go ahead and open the gate." The morning felt too normal for how she sounded. Cool, early fall air. A faint BBQ smell drifting from somewhere down the street. Sunlight stretched across my driveway edge and warmed the metal bars. I stood inside the gate with a coffee in my hand, listening to the soft hiss of a grill in the distance and the quiet confidence in her voice up close. Access for what I asked. She flicked her eyes to the clipboard as if it contained the universe. Association operations, she said. Maintenance, inspection, crews need to get through. I didn't step closer. I didn't reach for the latch. Her phone stayed trained on the lock, like the lock had committed a crime. "This is private property," I said. Her smile tightened just enough to show she'd heard the word private and didn't like it. "It's within association boundaries," she replied. "So the HOA has authority. Open it." I took one slow sip before saying anything else. Not to be dramatic. To stay measured. The kind of measured men learn when they've watched people like her try to win by triggering a reaction. "No," I said. Denise blinked. The smile held for a beat, then shifted. "No." "What? No entry," I said. "No access." She lifted her phone a little higher. "Sir, you can't deny the HOA access to common property." I let the phrase hang in the air because phrases like that are how they do it. They name something, and if you don't challenge the name, it becomes the truth. "Common property," I repeated. She nodded like she'd just won a point. Then she said it louder, clean enough for nearby windows to hear. "That access road is common property." A few curtains moved on the street. Not much, just enough to remind me this neighborhood liked watching trouble more than stopping it. I set my coffee down on the wooden post beside the gate and kept my voice even. "It's my access road," I said, "and you don't have permission to come onto it." Denise's expression sharpened. "You're behind the entrance. You use our streets. You benefit from the community." "Close enough isn't ownership," I said, and I watched her mouth tighten around the idea. She tapped something on the clipboard and angled the phone toward the lock again, filming the chain and the weathered metal like she was collecting evidence for a file she'd already named. "I'm documenting your refusal," she said. "This will be enforcement." There it was, the word meant to push fear into your chest. Enforcement. Fines. Lawyers. Liens. The latter HOAs liked to climb while pretending they were just keeping things tidy. I didn't give her the look she wanted. I didn't argue in circles. I just held the boundary. "This gate stays closed," I said. Her voice dropped lower and more personal, like she was trying a different key. "You know," she said, "we can cut that lock." The BBQ smell drifted again, sweet and smoky, like the world was mocking how ordinary this was to her. She said it as casually as trimming a hedge. Her phone kept rolling. "We've done it before," she added and smiled like she expected me to shrink. I rested my hand lightly on the latch, not threatening, just present. "You cut that lock," I said, "and you're trespassing. You're damaging private property." Denise's smile vanished. For a second, she looked offended, like I'd used an impolite word. Then she straightened and slipped back into that board member posture. "You're obstructing HOA operations," she said louder again. "That's a serious violation." "Then put it in writing," I replied. "Because you're not coming through my gate today." She stared through the bar's phone, still aimed at the lock, as if the camera could rewrite the boundary. Then she gave a short laugh that wasn't humor so much as disbelief. "Fine," she said, scribbling something on the clipboard. "You're making a mistake." Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. But one thing was already clear: she hadn't come to ask. She'd come to take. Denise turned on her heel and walked back toward the manicured side of the neighborhood, boots clicking on the HOA sidewalk like punctuation. At the corner, she glanced back once more and raised her phone, filming the lock again, as if she wanted a final shot for the record. Then she called over her shoulder as a threat wrapped in policy. "We can cut that lock." Beep. My phone lit up on the kitchen table like it was excited to deliver bad news. The subject line hit in all caps, aggressive enough to feel like it had been typed with clenched teeth. "Notice of violation, immediate compliance required." I didn't open it right away. I stood there in the quiet, one hand on the back of a chair, the other still holding my mug, like I needed something solid. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up the way it always did, sprinklers clicking on a distant garage door, groaning open, someone's dog barking twice and stopping. Then I tapped the email. The message was short, stiff, and proud of its own formatting. A reference number sat near the top like a badge, a case file ID. A line about document retention like this was a courtroom record, and not a woman with a clipboard who didn't know where she was standing. Violation, obstructing common access road. Violation, refusal of HOA inspection. Violation, interference with association operations. My jaw tightened as I read the words common access road again. Not driveway, not gate, road. Like my property was just a hallway they expected to use. The email laid out the steps like a menu. 24 hours to comply. Then daily fines. Then legal enforcement. Then the word that didn't need bold letters to punch you in the stomach. Lien. I stared at it for 3 seconds. Not blinking, not breathing right. Just letting it sit there on the screen, heavy and ugly. People joke about HOAs until they see that word attached to their address. I scrolled down. The tone never changed. No question marks, no attempt at conversation. Just a steady assumption that they could say common property enough times and reality would adjust itself. At the bottom, one line stood out like it had been written for intimidation, not policy. Failure to comply may result in contractor action, including removal of unauthorized obstructions. Contractor. Removal. I set my mug down slowly and felt the pressure settle in, not like fear, but like a weight they were trying to make me carry for them. I could almost hear Denise's voice in it. Bright, certain, smiling through the bars. That access road is common property. I read the email again, slower this time, and noticed what she'd really done. She'd turned my refusal into a violation. She'd taken my boundary and labeled it as disobedience. And the worst part was how official it looked. The formatting, the spacing, the case number. HOAs love paperwork, because paperwork looks like authority even when it's built on nothing. I forwarded the notice to myself and saved a screenshot. Then I opened a folder on my laptop and dropped it in like it belonged in a file cabinet. If they wanted this to be paperwork, warfare, fine. Paper doesn't make you right. Records do. Later that morning, I stopped at Lou's Diner off Highway 17, the kind of place where the coffee never tastes fancy, but always tastes honest. The air inside smelled like bacon grease and syrup, and something fried that had been living in the walls since the 90s. I sat in a booth near the front and stared at the bulletin board by the register. Lost dog flyers. A church fish fry announcement. A handwritten note about a used lawnmower for sale. Normal life. I sipped coffee and listened to the clink of silverware and the soft hum of small talk. For a minute, I tried to let it all push the HOA out of my head. Then my phone buzzed again. Another email. Same sender. Same formatting. Same tone. Final notice, gate removal scheduled. I opened it and felt my stomach drop, not because I believed them, but because I recognized the escalation. This time they didn't talk about compliance. They talked about action. Contractor will remove the gate if access is not granted immediately. Costs will be billed to homeowner. I stared at the screen like it had insulted me personally. The nerve of it. The confidence. They were announcing trespass like it was governance. I paid my check, walked out into the daylight, and drove home with both hands steady on the wheel. My house looked the same as it had yesterday. The gate stood there in the sun, quiet and unmoved, like it didn't know it was about to become a battleground. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table again and pulled the email up on my laptop. I read every line, not like a homeowner panicking, but like someone building a case. Case number, timestamp, threat language, contractor mention. Then I heard it. A low diesel rumble outside. Not a car, not a neighbor's SUV. A truck. Slow, heavy, coming closer. The diesel rumble grew louder until it was right outside my house, heavy and impatient. I stepped into my open garage and felt a cold wind slide in behind me, cutting through the warm smell of sawdust and motor oil. My tool bench sat along the wall, half-finished projects, lined up like normal life was still allowed to exist. Then the truck rolled into view. White pickup, magnetic HOA maintenance sign slapped on the door like a badge. Two men climbed out wearing reflective vests, both moving with that practiced look of people who'd been told the job was already approved. One carried a tool bag. The other carried bolt cutters. Not small ones either. Long-handled, steel-jawed, the kind that don't ask questions. The kind that turn policy into damage. Denise Hartley followed behind them like an overseer. Same clipboard, same phone, same clean boots that didn't belong on gravel. She didn't greet me. She didn't even pretend. "We're here to resolve the obstruction," she said, pointing at my lock like it was a hazard sign. "Resolve," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "You refused access. The HOA is authorized to remove barriers to common property." There it was, again like a spell she thought would work if she said it enough times. "That access road is common property," she added. "You're blocking HOA access." I stepped out of the garage and walked toward the gate, calm on purpose. I could feel the workers watching my hands, my shoulders, my face, trying to read whether this was going to turn ugly. I stopped in front of the lock. "You don't have permission to enter," I said. The man with the bolt cutters shifted his grip. His eyes flicked to Denise, waiting for her to confirm the script. Denise lifted her chin. "We do have permission," she said. "It's HOA access." I didn't argue in circles. I didn't debate bylaws with someone holding bolt cutters. I pulled my phone out and hit record. The screen flashed, and the red dot appeared. REC. Denise's eyes narrowed at the sight of it. "Oh, of course," she said, dripping with fake patience. "Record if you need to. That won't change anything." I held the phone steady and spoke clearly like I was leaving a message for someone who mattered more than her clipboard. "You do not have permission to enter my property," I said. "You do not have permission to cut that lock." The man with the cutters hesitated. His shoulders tightened. He looked like he'd been hired for landscaping, not a confrontation. Denise snapped, "Do it." The cutters lifted slightly. I stepped forward 1 pace, and the cutters lowered 1/2 inch. Not because I touched him. Not because I threatened him. Just because he suddenly understood what he was holding and where he was standing. The second worker cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "If he's saying no, we can't, yes, we can," Denise cut him off. "He's obstructing HOA operations." I turned my phone slightly so the camera caught her face and the bolt cutters in the same frame. "Cut it," she repeated louder this time. "The HOA has authority." I kept my voice steady. "If you cut that lock," I said, "that's property damage." Denise's smile vanished like a light going out. "What you're doing," she shot back, "is interference, and it's going to cost you." Then she raised her voice, projecting toward the street like she wanted an audience. "You'll be fined daily," she announced, "and you'll be responsible for all legal costs. This can go all the way to a lien." She said lien like it was the final word in the universe. I nodded once like I'd heard her. Then I said, "Bring real authority." Denise blinked. "Excuse me, call your lawyer," I said. "Call whoever you need. But you're not cutting my lock." Her cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, but with anger she'd been holding back since the first time I told her no. "If you don't move," she said, "I'm calling the sheriff." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because she'd finally said the one thing that could force reality into the situation. "Please do," I replied. That stopped her for 1/2 beat. HOA. People aren't used to threats being accepted. They're used to people shrinking. They're used to panic. Denise turned sharply and started tapping on her phone loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sheriff's office," she said, putting on a helpless tone like she was the victim. "Yes, we have a homeowner obstructing HOA maintenance access. Crews are here and he's interfering. He's filming us." She paced in front of the gate while the workers stood frozen behind her. The man with the bolt cutters kept them lowered now like he was hoping the whole thing would dissolve before he had to do anything that would haunt him. Minutes crawled. Cold wind pushed through my open garage again, rattling something light on the tool bench. A loose tape measure clicked against a metal clamp. The sound was small, but it felt loud in the tension. Then a patrol car rolled up slow. Tires crunched softly on gravel. The light bar flashed once and went dark. A deputy stepped out, late 30s, maybe heavy jacket, calm eyes. He scanned the scene in one sweep, truck gate, bolt cutters, Denise, my phone recording. His gaze paused on the bolt cutters just long enough to register what they were. Then he walked up. "Evening," he said. "What's going on?" Denise jumped in before the deputy could even finish the question. "This homeowner is obstructing HOA access," she said fast. "We have the right to access the common property, and he's refusing. He's threatening us with trespass, and he's filming." The deputy nodded slowly, not agreeing, just collecting. Then he turned to me. "Sir," I kept my voice measured. "This is my property," I said. "They showed up with bolt cutters and threatened to cut my lock." The deputy's eyes moved back to the cutters, then to Denise. Denise leaned forward, confidence returning, now that she had a uniform in front of her. Deputy, she said, we have HOA rights. Easement rights. He's in violation. The deputy didn't react to HOA rights like they were magic words. He reacted to the only thing that mattered. Proof. He looked at Denise and asked one calm question. "Ma'am," he said, "do you have documentation?" The deputy didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten anybody. He just stood there in that quiet law enforcement stillness and looked at Denise like she was a grown adult who should know better. "Ma'am," he said again, slower, "do you have documentation?" Denise's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes flicked down to her clipboard, like she expected the answer to be printed there. "It's obviously part of the community," she said finally. "It's within the neighborhood." The deputy nodded once, still calm. "That's not documentation." Denise flushed. "I'm on the board." The deputy didn't flinch. Being on the board isn't proof of ownership or jurisdiction. Behind her, the man with the bolt cutters looked like he could finally breathe again. He lowered them all the way, holding them like dead weight instead of a tool. Denise tried to push forward anyway. "We have easement rights," she insisted. "HOA access rights." "Okay," the deputy said. "Where are they?" Denise's jaw tightened hard. "I didn't add anything. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The silence did the work for me." The deputy turned slightly toward the workers. "No documents, no entry," he said, clear and simple. "You understand?" Both men nodded immediately. Denise's eyes snapped to them like she couldn't believe they were choosing reality over her confidence. The deputy looked back at me. "Sir, if they come back and attempt entry again, call." Then he walked to his patrol car and left without drama, leaving Denise standing in the cold wind like a queen who'd just been told her crown was plastic. She stayed at the gate for a few seconds after the truck backed out, staring through the bars like she could still will the lock open. "This will become legal," she said quietly. I met her eyes. Good. That word hit her harder than an insult. She hated good. Good meant I wasn't afraid of paperwork. Good meant I wasn't going to fold. Denise turned and walked away, boots clicking down the HOA sidewalk again, but her posture had changed. It wasn't victorious anymore. It was determined. That night, I cleared my dining table like I was setting up for surgery. I pulled out my closing file, the thick folder most homeowners shove into a drawer and forget. Deed packet. County filings. Old surveys. Tax records. Things that had seemed boring when I bought the place and now felt like armor. I started with the HOAs, CC, and Rs, flipping through the pages until I found the part that mattered most. The boundary description. The section that defined what the declaration actually applied to. Exhibit A. The list of lots. I scanned it slowly, line by line, and felt my stomach settle into certainty. The numbering was clean, predictable, developer neat. And my parcel wasn't there. Not missing like a typo. Different like it belonged to a separate story. I opened my laptop and pulled up the county GIS map. The screen glowed blue-white in the dark kitchen, the kind of light that makes everything else look small. I typed in my address, HOAs, and watched the layers load. Parcel lines appeared first, sharp and undeniable. Then the subdivision overlay. The HOA lots showed up like a grid of identical rectangles. My property sat adjacent, close enough to be assumed, not included. I zoomed in until I could see the exact line where my gate sat. The red boundary wrapped around it cleanly like a fence drawn by law itself. Private, deeded separately. I leaned back and stared at the screen for a long moment. Not angry, not relieved, just steady. because now it wasn't an argument anymore. It wasn't Denise's tone versus my refusal. It was county data tied to tax records, evidence that didn't care how loudly she spoke. I printed the map. The printer whirred loud in the quiet house, feeding paper through like it was spitting out truth. When the page slid into the tray, I picked it up and felt the warmth of fresh ink. Then I printed the deed's legal description. Lot references, measurements, coordinates that didn't match the HOA's clean little grid. I stacked the papers neatly, then opened another county record search and looked for anything that would prove what Denise kept claiming. Annexation. Easement. Any recorded instrument that pulled my parcel into their jurisdiction. Nothing. No annexation filing. No easement grant. No legal bridge between their common property fantasy and my access road. Denise had threatened fines and liens over land her HOA didn't control. Confidence isn't jurisdiction. The next morning, I went to the post office with a folder tucked under my arm. The air inside smelled like cardboard and floor cleaner. A line of people stood quietly under fluorescent lights, holding packages and money orders like they were waiting to confess something. When it was my turn, I slid my letter across the counter. Calm, formal, typed clean. I disputed every violation. I rejected every fine. I demanded proof of annexation. I demanded proof of easement. And I stated plainly that any attempt to cut the lock or enter the property would be treated as trespass and property damage. The clerk stamped my certified mail receipt with a dull, heavy thud. Received. That sound felt like a door closing. I walked out into the sunlight holding the stamped slip like it was a shield, proof they couldn't pretend not to see. By afternoon, my phone buzzed again. An email went out to the whole neighborhood, written in Denise's cheerful bored voice, but the words were sharper than the tone. Emergency HOA meeting, community access issue, attendance strongly encouraged. Then a second email came addressed only to me. Short, cold. The board will be voting to authorize gate removal due to obstruction of common property access. I read it once, then again, slower. Emergency vote. Gate removal authorization. Denise wasn't backing down. She was trying to make the neighborhood her jury. The clubhouse smelled like stale coffee and cheap carpet cleaner, the kind that tries to cover up years of meetings nobody wanted to attend. Folding chairs were set in uneven rows. A few residents stood in clusters near the back arms, crossed voices low like they'd come for entertainment more than answers. Near the entrance, the same bulletin board from the diner had a cousin here flyers for a community BQ, a lost cat. Notice a reminder about trash cans needing to be out of sight. Normal neighborhood stuff pinned up like this place was friendly. It didn't feel friendly tonight. Denise Hartley stood at the front with a microphone and a stack of papers. Her clipboard sat on the table like a prop in a courtroom drama. She tapped the mic twice, and the sharp sound made people quiet down. "Good evening, everyone," she said, smiling. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Her voice carried that same bright certainty she'd used at my gate, the kind that assumes agreement before anyone speaks. "This meeting is being held to address an obstruction impacting community operations," she continued. "And for the record," she paused, turning her head slightly, "the homeowner responsible is present tonight." Heads turned. I sat in the second row with my binder on my lap, plain black, organized with tabs and sleeves. I didn't shift. I didn't look away. I let them look. Denise smiled wider, satisfied she'd gotten the spotlight where she wanted it. "This homeowner has been obstructing the community's right to access shared areas," she said, her tone tightening, "and has refused to cooperate with association operations." She let that sit for a beat, then leaned into the microphone like she was about to announce a verdict. The access road is common property, she said. The HOA has the right to use it, maintain it, and access it. His gate is an unauthorized obstruction. A murmur rolled through the room. Some annoyed, some curious, some uncomfortable. Denise lifted a sheet of paper. The board will be voting tonight to authorize removal of the unauthorized gate and lock, she announced. This is your final opportunity to resolve this without escalation. She looked straight at me like she expected me to squirm. I didn't. I stood up slowly, not angry, not dramatic, just steady. The room quieted in that way it does when someone isn't afraid of the microphone. Before you vote, I said I have one question. Denise's smile tightened. This is not the time for, it is, I said, calm and clear. If you're claiming authority over my property, it's exactly the time. A few people shifted in their chairs. Denise exhaled through her nose like she was forcing herself to be patient. Fine, she said. Make it quick. I looked at her, then at the board members beside her, and spoke like I was reading a line off a document. Show the easement, I said. Denise blinked. Excuse me. The easement, I repeated. The recorded document that gives you access rights to that road. Her cheeks flushed. We don't have to. Yes, you do, I said. If you claim authority, show the record. Denise laughed sharply, like the idea offended her. It's obviously part of the HOA, she snapped. It's within the community. That's not a legal answer, I said. Her eyes flared. She turned her head toward the board members like she expected backup. She didn't get it. One of them stared down at the table. Another looked like he wanted to disappear into the carpet. I opened my binder. The sound of the rings snapping apart was small, but in that room it landed like a gavel. I walked to the front table and set the binder down carefully, not slamming it, not showing off, just placing it where everyone could see. This is my deed, I said, sliding the first page forward. Legal description included. I flipped to the next tab. This is the county GIS boundary overlay, I continued. My parcel line, the gate location, the access road sits inside my property. Denise leaned forward, squinting like she could will the lines to move. I turned another page. This is the HOA declaration exhibit, I said. The list of lots covered by your CC and Rs. My parcel isn't listed. A few people in the room leaned in. Someone whispered, What does that mean? It means I'm deeded separately, I said, voice steady. I'm not in your HOA. Denise's face hardened. That's impossible, she snapped. You're right here. Close enough isn't ownership, I said, and a couple of people nodded without realizing they were doing it. Denise jabbed a finger toward my papers. Those don't matter, she said. The association has access rights. There's an easement. I looked at her and held her gaze. Then show it, I said. Silence dropped over the room like a blanket. No coughs. No whispers. Even the HVAC hum felt quieter. Denise's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I didn't fill the silence for her. I let it stretch long enough for everyone to feel the difference between confidence and proof. Finally, Denise snapped, You're wasting everyone's time with technicalities. Records aren't technicalities, I replied. They're reality. Her voice rose. The board will proceed with the vote, she said, forcing the room back into her script. Motion to authorize removal of the unauthorized gate and bill the homeowner. One board member hesitated, hand hovering like it weighed 100 pounds. Denise stared at him hard. He swallowed and raised his hand. The second board member raised his hand too slower, like he hated what he was doing, but didn't know how to stop. Denise lifted her own hand with certainty. The motion passed. For a second, she looked almost relieved, like she'd just proven she could still win by pushing harder. "It's done," she said into the microphone. "Contractor action is authorized." A wave of sound moved through the room. Shock, anger, confusion. Someone muttered, "Can they do that?" Denise turned toward me, eyes sharp. "You have been notified," she said. "This is your final warning." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I closed my binder and slid the documents back inside, neat and controlled. I'd gotten what I needed. Not approval. Commitment. She'd just voted in public to remove private property without proof. I stood to leave. As I walked toward the exit, someone touched my elbow lightly. I turned and saw Calvin Rhodes, the HOA treasurer, standing in the shadow near the doorway, like he didn't want anyone to notice him. He looked pale, uneasy. The kind of uneasy you get when you've seen numbers that don't add up. "You're not in the HOA," he whispered. I nodded once. "No." Calvin swallowed hard, eyes flicking toward the front of the room where Denise was still standing tall behind the mic. Then he leaned closer and said the sentence that changed the shape of everything. "They've been billing money tied to your land." Calvin's message was one line: "Meet me at 7, behind the grocery store. Bring nothing but a notebook." At 7 sharp, the grocery store lot was washed in white overhead lights. A cold breeze pushed paper scraps along the curb. I parked near the far edge, away from the main doors where nobody lingered. Calvin arrived in a dull sedan and parked 2 spaces away, like distance might protect him. He got out without smiling, glanced around, then walked toward me with his shoulders tight. "I can't be seen talking to you at the clubhouse," he said under his breath. "Denise checks." He held out a manila envelope. The flap was creased like it had been opened and closed by nervous hands. "I shouldn't be doing this," he added. "You already are," I said. He released the envelope, and I felt the weight of paper inside. Across the street, Lou's diner was still open, and the faint smell of fried onions drifted on the wind, like a reminder that normal life kept moving. "I volunteered because I thought it was landscaping and budgets," Calvin said. "Boring stuff." Denise has been using the HOA like a weapon for 2 years, but this time she's doing it because she's cornered. I opened the envelope and slid out the packet. HOA letterhead, clean formatting numbers stacked in columns like they were facts of nature. I flipped pages slowly until a line item caught my eye. Access Improvement Project, Phase 1. Contractor mobilization/site prep. The amount wasn't huge, but it was real. Enough money to matter. Access improvement to where I asked. Calvin's face tightened. "Behind your gate," he said. "They've been treating your access road like a future connector. A service corridor. Shortcut for contractors. Deliveries, whatever sounds noble." I turned the page. The paper rustled sharp in the quiet, and my eyes stopped on a scribble in the margin. Not typed. Not formal. Just ink, "Gate removal, homeowner resistance anticipated." For a second I stared at it, the words sitting there like a confession. "This wasn't maintenance," I said. "It was a plan." Calvin nodded once. "She told the board it was already basically HOA land," he said, "that nobody would challenge it. Some believed her. Some didn't want to ask. She kept saying she'd handle it through enforcement, like enforcement could turn into ownership." I stacked the pages neatly. My hands stayed steady, but my thoughts locked onto the motive. The threats, the bolt cutters, the emergency vote. All of it fit this budget line and that margin note. Calvin leaned closer. If they cut your lock and remove your gate, the HOA is liable, he said. The board is liable. And Denise becomes liable personally. Why tell me now, I asked. He swallowed. Because residents are paying for something that could blow up, he said. And because once she starts spending that money, she won't stop. 2 nights later, the clubhouse was packed. People stood along the walls holding printed emails and screenshots. The smell of stale coffee hung in the air. Denise sat up front with a man in a suit beside her counsel, and she wore the same tight smile like this was still her room. We're going to keep this orderly, Denise said into the microphone. There has been misinformation. Misinformation, someone snapped back. I walked to the front with the manila envelope and my binder calm on purpose. Denise pointed at me like she wanted the room to turn. This homeowner is disrupting. He's got documents, a woman cut in. I set the budget pages on the table beside the mic. This is the HOA budget, I said. Line item, Access Improvement Project, Phase 1. Voices rose. Access to where? Why are we paying for this? Denise tried to speak over it. That's not what I slid the next page forward and read the margin note out loud. Gate removal. Homeowner resistance anticipated. The room erupted anger betrayal, the kind that doesn't need a leader. Counsel's posture stiffened. Calvin stood from the side wall looking sick. It's not mischaracterized, Calvin said loud enough for the mic. The board approved funds assuming access rights. We never had legal proof of jurisdiction. Someone muttered, so we're liable. Calvin nodded once. Yes. A man in a county jacket stood near the doorway. I'm with code enforcement, he said calmly, holding up a folder. We've received complaints regarding potential easement misrepresentation and unauthorized access planning. If the association is claiming or attempting to establish access across private land without recorded easements, we will be reviewing filings. The air changed. Not louder, heavier. Denise's counsel leaned close, whispering fast. Denise's mouth opened, then shut, like her body couldn't decide whether to argue or survive. Counsel stood and raised a hand. We're taking a recess, he announced. The board needs to confer. Booze rose, but he didn't flinch. He leaned down toward Denise and said something low that still carried in the hush. Stop talking. They disappeared through the side door. When counsel came back, Denise wasn't beside him. He adjusted his jacket and spoke into the microphone with the careful tone of someone stepping away from a fire. Given the information presented tonight, I am advising the board to immediately suspend enforcement actions related to this property and cease any attempt to remove the gate. A wave moved through the room, relief rage calculation. Then he added even more carefully, and I will not represent Ms. Hartley in any individual capacity in this matter. Denise sat frozen, suddenly smaller than the paperwork she'd tried to weaponize. The email came from the HOA's counsel, not Denise. That alone told me everything I needed to know. The subject line was careful, corporate, and cold in a way that felt permanent. Notice of action, resolution of disputed enforcement. I opened it at my kitchen table, the same place I'd first read the word lien and felt my stomach turn. This time my hands didn't tighten. My breathing didn't change. The message was written like a company trying to protect itself from its own employee. All enforcement actions related to the property are hereby withdrawn. All fines rescinded. No lien consideration. No further contractor action permitted. No apology. HO. As don't apologize. They resolve. They conclude. They close the matter. But the outcome was unmistakable. They were backing away. The next paragraph was even cleaner. The association will cease all direct contact regarding this dispute and will communicate only through legal counsel. In plain English, Denise wasn't coming back to my gate with a clipboard. I printed the email and slid it into my binder, then drove to the post office like I was sealing a chapter. The lobby smelled like paper and dust and old glue. A flag hung near the corner, slightly faded, still upright. On the way out, I stopped by my attorney's office. Small building, quiet hallway, another American flag behind the receptionist's desk. My attorney read the notice of action twice, then nodded. "They're done," he said. "At least with you." He didn't sound triumphant. He sounded practical, like he'd seen this kind of retreat before. "You want it locked down even tighter?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "In writing. From someone who doesn't care about HOA politics." That afternoon, I met the surveyor. He laid his paperwork on the table like he'd done it 1,000 times. Calm, uninterested in drama, interested in lines. He slid a stamped statement across to me. "Your gate and access road are located within your parcel boundary. No recorded easement grants HOA access. No annexation instrument exists for HOA jurisdiction over this tract." The stamp hit the page with a dull, final thud. It was the sound of certainty. I drove home with the paper on the passenger seat like it deserved its own seatbelt. When I got to the gate, the lock still hung there, scratched from years of weather, but untouched by bolt cutters. I stood in front of it for a moment and listened to the neighborhood. A lawnmower somewhere. Kids shouting faintly in a backyard. Wind moving through trees. Ordinary sounds returning like they'd been waiting for permission. I replaced the lock anyway. Not because I had to, because it felt right. Fresh steel. Clean key. A quiet reset. I stepped back and looked at the gate again. Same gate. Same road. Same boundary. The only thing that had changed was the respect. That night my attorney called. Keep everything he said. All of it I asked. All of it he repeated. This wasn't just you. I leaned against the kitchen counter and stared at the binder on the table. The notice emails, the case numbers, the threats, the budget line, the margin note, the council retreat. I understood what he meant. If they'd been willing to call my access road common property, without proof, they'd been willing to do it to someone else too. Maybe they already had. I thought about Denise sitting frozen at the clubhouse while her own counsel stepped away from her. No yelling, no fists, no chaos. Just paperwork meeting records. Finally, someone fought back. The next morning, another message came through. A short one. Not from the HOA. From Calvin. You did the right thing. Just be careful. They'll try it again somewhere else. I read it twice, then looked out the window toward the gate. The road beyond it was quiet the way it should have been from the beginning. And I knew he was right. People like Denise don't stop believing they're entitled. They just stop when consequences become real. A week after the council email, the neighborhood went quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful yet. It felt like people were talking behind doors. Phone calls, closed meetings, insurance questions. The kind of quiet that means the machine is still moving just out of sight. Then the HOA sent another email. Not from Denise. Not even from the board president. From the association management company, written in that careful, sterile voice that never admits guilt, but always admits change. Updated community disclosure. Boundary map correction. I opened the attachment at my kitchen table and scrolled slowly, letting my eyes do what Denise's confidence never had. The map was clean, professional. A thick line traced the HOA boundary, like a border on a country, and for the first time it was honest. The HOA ended before my gate. It didn't touch my access road. It didn't wrap around my parcel. It didn't pretend. It stopped. I stared at it for a long moment, then printed it and slid it into my binder beside the notice of action. Deed. G.I.S. Surveyor stamp. Now the HOA's own corrected map. All the pieces aligned. That afternoon I stopped by Lou's Diner. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the window, a tired blue glow that had outlived every HOA board member in town. The smell of coffee and bacon grease hit me the second I walked in. A couple guys at the counter were already talking about it. "You see that new map?" one of them said. "Yeah," the other replied. So it was never theirs. The first guy shook his head. They were going to cut that man's lock over land they didn't even own. I slid into a booth with a mug of coffee and listened without joining in. The talk wasn't excited anymore. It was embarrassed. The kind of tone people get when they realize they almost helped something wrong happen. A waitress refilled my cup and nodded toward the bulletin board. "Whole town's reading about it," she said quietly. The bulletin board had a fresh printout pinned to it. Now someone had posted the HOA's corrected boundary notice like it was a warning sign. "Power stops here." A few days later, another HOA email went out. Reserve and Budget Review Findings Summary. It was short, careful, legal. It didn't name Denise, but it didn't have to. It mentioned irregular approvals, unverified access assumptions, vendor planning without documented authority. The language was polite, but the meaning was sharp. Money had been moved on confidence instead of proof, and now the community knew it. The audit wasn't entertainment. It was consequence. People who never attended meetings were suddenly reading spreadsheets like scripture. Folks who'd never questioned a board vote were asking what their dues had been used for. Neighbors who used to shrug at HOA emails were printing them out and saving them. Not because they cared about my gate, because they cared about where power ended. Denise resigned the following week. The HOA announcement was 2 sentences long. "Ms. Hartley has stepped down effective immediately. We thank her for her service." No farewell speech, no tribute, no explanation. Just gone. That was the real punishment. Not public humiliation, not screaming, not a viral meltdown. Being reduced to a liability and quietly removed. That evening, I went out to my garage and stood at my tool bench for the first time in days. The same bench that had felt like a shelter when the truck showed up with bolt cutters. I picked up a wrench, tightened a loose clamp on an old project, and let the normal rhythm settle back into my hands. The wind outside was softer now, the air warmer, the season shifting like the neighborhood was trying to reset itself. Later, just before sunset, I walked down to the gate. The new lock gleamed slightly in the fading light. The no trespassing sign was still there, not angry, not dramatic, just clear. I rested my palm on the metal for a moment, feeling the warmth it had held from the day. Behind me, the neighborhood sounded ordinary again. A distant lawnmower, someone laughing on a porch, a dog barking once, then quiet. No emails, no threats, no trucks, just space. I closed the gate slowly, not out of spite, not out of fear, simply because it was mine to close. The latch clicked clean and final. Boundaries aren't hostility, they're peace. I stood there for a second and listened to the quiet settle in the kind that doesn't feel tense anymore, the kind that feels earned. Denise had tried to win with paperwork and posture. She'd tried to turn my access road into common property by saying it loud enough and often enough. But ownership doesn't argue. It exists. When the updated boundary map was posted at the clubhouse, the line stopped cleanly before my gate, and the room finally went quiet for the right reason. A formal notice of action sat in my binder beside the fresh lock receipt, proof that pressure can't rewrite a deed. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. The neighborhood didn't cheer, but I saw it in their faces: relief, accountability, and the understanding that common property was never a substitute for records. I closed my gate at sunset and felt something rare in a place like this: peace that didn't require permission. Finally, someone fought back.